And once more. All right, let's bring up our next panel. So again, one of the reasons why we wanted to locate our task force meeting in Marin is the remarkable work that's actually happening at community scale, where Marin communities are really making progress in many ways beyond even other places in the state around how to activate community members and homeowners towards building resilience. So please come on up and have a seat. Do you know where the clicker is? And I'll tell you this: we're going to this will be our last panel before lunch, and then we'll break for lunch. So J.C. Hyde leads the California Fire Safe Council. And of course, that is the association of fire-safe communities across the state. So it's really appropriate for you to be moderating today. Welcome, JC.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Really excited to be here to talk about the amazing work being done in Marin County to create fire-safe communities. So I am here with a wonderful panel of local experts. Let's start off by asking them to introduce ourselves. Let's start with Chief Weber.
Good morning, everybody. Jason Weber, Marin County Fire Chief.
Good morning. I'm Julie McMillan. I'm a member of the Rostown Council and also on the board of Marin Wildfire.
Good morning. Mark Brown, Executive Officer for Marin Wildfire.
Hi, everybody. Claire Mooney. I work with the local nonprofit called the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, where I serve as our Vice President for Park Projects and Conservation.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So I am really thrilled to be here today to learn more about the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority and how it set itself up to be so successful in moving the needle on community wildfire resilience. My organization, the California Fire Safe Council, is focused on empowering and mobilizing local communities to live safely with wildfire. And Marin County is a really stellar example of an organization that has really taken that charge and stepped up to take charge of their own resiliency. I'm excited to pull the lessons learned from this panel and think about how we might be able to replicate that across the state. There are many ongoing conversations in the state about how we can elevate the role of local government and local actors in wildfire resilience, how we can build their capacity, and then how we arrange state and federal frameworks to support that capacity. In most places, state and federal funding is comprising of the bulk of the investment in wildfire resilience. But Marin has found a great way to create an additional funding stream, a local funding stream, that has been a critical innovation, especially in a landscape where we see fluctuations in the availability of state and federal funds. Because of Marin's local funding, they have been able to invest directly in their own priority projects and also build some of their local organizational capacity. A great example of this is funding some of the activities of their local Fire Safe Council, Fire Safe Marin, who serves as their trusted community outreach partner. The LA fires have forced us once again to ask how we're investing our limited resources to make the greatest impact on public safety. And there's a real opportunity here to layer in an array of funding sources to support those strategic and coordinated investments in the highest risk areas. And we need to be targeting concurrent interventions across scales, along with that really critical community education piece in the same place at the same time, and to approach this challenge from a whole community perspective. And Marin presents a compelling example of a coordinated approach and of the steady progress you can make when your residents engage and invest in their own community's resilience. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to share their insights on the successes and the lessons learned from the Marin model, and starting with Chief Weber. So
Alrighty.
Chief Weber, in our last panel, we heard about lessons learned from the LA fires. The North Bay also experienced some devastating wildfires back in 2017. So what lessons did you all learn in Marin County from that experience, and how did that lead you towards the process of creating the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority?
Thank you, JC, and good morning, everybody. And yes, lessons learned. We continue to learn every day. A little bit about Marin. Marin's no stranger to fire history. And you know, through really the mid-20th century, there's a pretty extensive fire history here in the county. As you take a look at, I think we all recognize some of the factors that played into the why behind Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. Climate-driven events across the United States, but especially in California, were more prevalent. The losses and costs from wildfires continue to be on the rise. And fire officials and elected officials here in the county knew it was a matter of when, not if, we were going to experience one of those disasters. Approaches across our county, I think probably like many counties, were largely agency dependent and lacked a cohesive strategy. I think we also recognized that we needed to come together with a sense of urgency, and I think Chief Tyler described the sense of urgency in a response to a wildfire. And I think collectively we have to change our mindset about a sense of urgency to mitigate and be able to live with fire in California. These really were three-pillar documents that were the foundation of Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. One was in 2016, we completed our first community wildfire protection plan. This really was a science-based approach. It also clearly highlighted the just overwhelming volume of work that needed to be done, from defensible space and public education all the way through forest resilience. In 2017, as was mentioned earlier, just to the county north of us in Sonoma, the devastation of those fires, the Board of Supervisors and their leadership leaning forward asked me as the fire chief to commission a study to look at lessons learned from that. We gathered fire officials, law enforcement, public land agencies, and fire chiefs and those same peers here in Marin, had very candid conversations about if you could roll back time and do something differently, what would that be? Ultimately, that led to 60 recommendations, some of which could be tackled with one-time funds or action that we had resources for. Many could not, and we certainly highlighted that there needed to be an ongoing investment that was substantial, and recognized that the only thing that separated us that evening in October of 2017 was an ignition source here. Frankly, we just got lucky. There were 19 jurisdictions in Marin that had local fire protection responsibilities. This is a relatively small county. You can see how that would complicate things. Next piece was the Marin County Civil Grand Jury, and after extensive interviews with public officials, fire agencies, their recommendations aligned with those that were developed by our fire professionals here in the county. Some of the challenges, in a matter of really months, we had to develop a joint powers authority. And I think I'll talk a little bit about the time and urgency that ended up being our benefit. We couldn't pause and really focused on ideas uniting and details dividing, and that was clear through that process, that we had to stay at an idea level, and we would work out and ultimately have to trust each other in the process of developing and building that. And I know Councilmember McMillan will cover some of those pieces. The grand jury report had 22 findings and 15 recommendations. A little bit about the approach here from the campaign piece. I think it's fair to say we're fortunate here in Marin. Our voters did support this overwhelmingly. But I want to focus today on what can be done in other communities. There are many avenues to a partnership and relationship contractually. They could include, an MOU, a joint powers authority. The point here is that we took, 19 fire agencies with taxing authority, not including the land management agencies, federal agencies, our environmental partners. There was substantial work that had to be done in order to be successful. And we really focused on that overall mission of what we needed to accomplish. But a little bit about coming together. It took a team to do this, and we were fortunate enough. When we look at the investment, it ended up being about $210 per residential parcel. Some places that won't get across the finish line from an election, especially in more rural counties. But if you look at that minor investment compared to what we're paying in insurance costs and other things, it's relatively minor overall. And I'm going to pass it on to Councilmember McMillan.
Okay, Councilmember McMillan, let's just start out with the basics. What is the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority? Who's part of it, and how has it changed the way you approach wildfire resilience strategy in the state, in the county?
Thank you. So after the measure passed, we needed to start up the agency, and we had no precedent, so we were starting it up from scratch. And the measure passed about 10 days before the COVID lockdown occurred. So all of our startup efforts were online. Liaisons from each of our 17-member agencies serve as directors on our board, each with varying degrees of interest, experience, and availability. Our first board meeting was held in June of 2020, of course on Zoom, and many of us had never met before. We had no staff. Chief Weber led our initial meeting. Our first board meeting action was to elect our president and our vice president, and I want to recognize Bruce Goins as our inaugural Marin Wildfire president. Bruce. And Bruce was so committed, he served for 2 years beyond the call of duty. The newly elected board president, President Goins, reiterated Marin Wildfire's strong commitment to environmental stewardship, echoing the themes from the Measure C campaign and the Joint Powers Agreement. Some of our goals were to anticipate issues and potential conflicts in advance and address them early. Our philosophy with stakeholders was to be collaborative, not adversarial, spend funds on projects, not on lawyers and litigation. The board felt a need to move very quickly given the urgency of the wildfire situation. Many of you will recall in the fall of 2020, there were raging fires across California and in West Marin, and the sky turned red over San Francisco. So we wanted to begin to mitigate the wildfire risk immediately, yet at the same time, we needed to be stewards of the taxpayers' funds and spend prudently, making the best investment of the taxpayers' dollar over the long term. Another emphasis then and now was being transparent, because this measure sunsets in 2030, so we need to go back to the voters seeking reapproval. The organization of the Marin Wildfire Agency is divided into 5 different zones. Southern Marin has 3 member agencies, West Marin has 4, Central Marin 7, San Rafael 2, Novato 1. So starting the agency up from scratch, we took 3 concurrent steps. First, we tried to organize the board. Second, we tried to build the core professional team. And third, we tried to develop key guiding documents. How do we organize the board? The collaboration on the board among directors was critical. Initially, we relied heavily on subcommittees to start up the agency to increase directors' education, interest, and their involvement. Each subcommittee would meet as needed and then report back to the board. The board president, Goins, formed an executive committee by asking 1 member from each zone to be on the executive committee. That committee did and still does the heavy lifting. We preview and vet issues, consider staff's approach and reports, provide feedback to staff before issues are presented to the entire board, and conduct deeper discussions. And the executive committee is also charged with previewing and approving board agendas. And we formed other board subcommittees to address bylaws, citizens oversight, finance, all the really fun legal stuff. We built the core Marin Wildfire professional team from scratch. An interim executive director was hired to help us set up meetings, agendas, and coordinate the board. An outside lawyer was hired to help us draft all the documents, navigate the Brown Act, et cetera. We hired an environmental lawyer who is an expert in CEQA compliance, an executive search firm to help spearhead our effort to hire a permanent executive director, someone who could hit the ground running. And an environmental consultant was there too. We looked for someone who would collaborate rather than be adversarial. And then we developed 2 key documents. We held a strategic planning retreat in January of 2021. We developed our vision statement and our mission statement. And I'm not going to read those to you. They're on our website, but they encompass all of our various elements: transparency, stewards of finance, the environment, et cetera. All the information that I've referred to is available on the Marin Wildfire website. And there's a great paper that a Stanford research student prepared that provides a detailed history and also attaches all the documents if you want to dive deeper.
All right, thank you so much for that summary. Mark, why don't you tell us what the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority is working on, what have been your greatest successes, and also how do you track those successes?
Thank you for that. And so leveraging off the strategic planning that Julie was talking about, creating a mission and vision, we work to first create our goals. And these are our 5 goals, and I like to start from the middle of the slide because we follow a house-out approach, and in the middle of the slide we have reduced risk to our homes. And so we'll dig a little bit deeper into that soon, but that's our defensible space evaluation program. And then we have improvements to our evacuation systems, alerts, notifications, and also hardening our evacuation routes. And then we are reducing wildfire fuels both within our communities, but along our wildland-urban interface boundaries. Switching back over to educating the public, and I heard a question earlier, how do we get the Firewise to engage? Well, through public education and our partners at Fire Safe Marin being our leads for our public education, we fund over $1 million a year in public education. And then we provide grants to our residents, and we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into that on how that is a return on investment to our residents, but as well as a return on investment to Marin Wildfire. So following our house-out approach and starting a partnership with Fireside and creating a defensible space evaluation program that is an absolute data animal. We have about 80,000 inspectable properties in Marin. Since we've initiated our program, we've inspected a little over 60,000 of those properties. We average about 30,000 properties a year with inspections. Big numbers don't mean anything if they aren't good inspections. And what we're finding, though, is that 48% of our property owners are allowing us to do a full 360 inspection. So that gets us the really good data. Some people could argue that we can get all this data from aerial imagery. But we find the personal touch is so important. And what our data is showing is that 60% of the residents who walk with our inspectors, or excuse me, if the residents walk with our inspectors, they are 60% more likely to take action. So that's why it's so important. And a return on investment, if you have an inspection like ours and you pay for it yourselves, it's probably $125. As Chief Weber mentioned, average household is paying about $200, $210. Keep those numbers in mind. Our resident grant program, we have 3 different forms that we're getting grants to our residents. Reimbursement grants, direct assistance for those who don't have financial ability, and then what we call voluntary abatement. Between those 3 programs, we are, for fiscal year 24-25, we have $2.55 million committed to helping our residents create Zone Zero, home hardening, and defensible space around their homes. So that's great return on investment for the taxpayers, but I look at it as a return on investment for Marin Wildfire dollars, because for every dollar that we're putting into our residents are putting between $6 and $7. So now we are getting that synergistic effect with all that work. And then our Chipper Day program. After you get your defensible space evaluation, you get invited to sign up for Chipper Days. And that is where each community has 6 opportunities to sign up. You do your defensible space work, put a pile out in front of your house, we come by and pick it up. Last year we had almost 4,700 pickups with 15,000 tons of material removed, or 15,000 cubic yards removed, and about an average pile size of 3.2 yards per yard. That's a lot of material. But I think we are driving a culture change. Right now, before we've even started our aggressive inspection campaign for this year, we have 1,500 signups for Chipper Days. That means the residents have started to get into a routine that we need to start doing this work, and this is before they even get an inspection. And that's about a $300 value to our residents. So they're already money ahead. And our public education, we cannot underemphasize or overemphasize public education on our partner with Fire Safe Marin. The bottom left one, though, is my favorite form of public education, and that's the defensible space evaluations. And then we have our Ember Stomp Wildfire Festival that we hold here, or actually across the creek at the fairgrounds. And we're averaging about 5,000 residents a year coming to that, learning what they can do to make their homes more fire prepared. Evacuation route clearing, that is the same road. So obviously safer during a wildfire, but I would argue it's safer day to day. And then our vegetation management. And it comes in all forms. The slide, or the picture on the left is the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. It's more expanded defensible space along the wild and urban interface boundary. And when I look at that project, that's why Marin Wildfire was built. There's 11 jurisdictions that touch that project. From time of concept to time of breaking ground, including going through a project-specific analysis through the Cal VTP, 18 months. I think that's pretty fast. And it's a 34-mile shaded fuel break, and we've completed over 22 miles of it. And then the slide, the piece on the right, is what we call our San Anselmo San Rafael's shaded or fuel reduction zone. Some of us just call it sassafras because it's easier to say that. It's a strategically placed local area treatment, and that's where we are identifying pathways that fires are taking, and we're putting a splat to interrupt that pathway. And then we can use the same shaded fuel break to know where the point of entry is from a pathway. We could reinforce that shaded fuel break. We also know by using pathways, the point of entry into the community, where we can work with our residents to do more home hardening. So how are we tracking this? And I won't spend much time on this because you guys can all go to the QR code. But we need to show our taxpayers that we are giving them a good return on their investment. So we have our public dashboard that will show exactly not just how much work we're doing, but how much risk we're reducing on our vegetation management work. So this is us telling the residents, hey, we're doing our part. Then we get to our DSpace dashboard, and this is where the residents, through their actions, can start telling us what they're doing for their part.
Wow, that is incredibly impressive. Congratulations on all of those achievements. Okay, and then to our last panelist today, Claire, your organization really focuses on the landscape level work. So how are you coordinating with the community resilience efforts, and why do you think that's so important?
Great, thanks for the question. I just wanted to start with a little bit of background because I imagine not a lot of folks in the room are familiar with OneTAM. OneTAM is an 11-year-old collaboration among the 4 public agencies in charge of managing Marin's wildlands. So that includes the National Park Service, California State Parks, Marin Water, and then Marin County Parks and Open Space. The Parks Conservancy, where I work, serves as a nonprofit partner, leading in both fundraising and helping to support the facilitation of the collaboration itself. So these partners came together more than 10 years ago to sign a memorandum of understanding with an understanding that we would be more effective if we worked together across our jurisdictional boundaries on issues that don't see that border. And in doing that, we'd have a greater landscape impact. We looked at what the unique strengths and talents were of each agency so that through that MOU, we could collaborate on what do we do best together and how do we do that really well. There's not everything needs to be done together, but a lot of work does benefit from it. Our collective work ranges from everything from holding community stewardship events, holding bioblitzes to fill in gaps in our understanding of pollinators, implementing and designing capital projects, to holding high school youth programs to develop our next level of stewards. So we really take a multifaceted approach to how we do this work. And essential to our success, as Laurel really highlighted this morning, was close collaboration with Figure to both advance the work we're doing in the here and now, but also to continue to reiterate that this is all of our work to steward Mount Tamalpais. So for those of you that will be participating in the field trips tomorrow, you'll get a chance to really experience the beauty of this mountain we love. But for those of you coming in from out of the area, I just wanted to take a minute to really highlight how special this place is. Mount Tam is critical habitat for an incredible layer of biodiversity. I think we saw a slide a couple of presentations ago that really highlighted California's biodiversity, and Mount Tam is truly exemplar of that. But moreover, it's also the source of much of Marin's drinking water, and with a national park, serves as an amazing opportunity through state parks and national parks for recreation, and Marin residents just enjoying its scenic beauty. I'm sure you'll get a chance to step outside today and just stare up into the hills. So building from this mountain-wide approach, the partners also identified there was work that was often best done at the county-wide scale, and this is where our forest resilience strategy is a clear example. And in partnership with the Parks Conservancy and our strong record of helping to fundraise and implement projects, we had a really great combination to be able to scale up our work and work in great combination with our folks up here on the table with me. Like many of you, I think as a nonprofit partner, we see, we support, and we hope we exemplify that need for a really strong partner to help call the meetings, take the notes, track the follow-up items, and then be sure to steward the funds that we're able to raise. As for public agencies with a nonprofit partner, science and stewardship really guide all of the work that we do, and we recognize the need for these to be truly multi-benefit projects in recognition of the multiple missions of our agencies. So whether you work at Marin Water and you're responsible for stewarding watershed lands to make sure that residents have clean drinking water, or you work at the National Park Service and you're in charge of stewarding our nation's greatest treasures for our access and enjoyment, we needed to recognize that we were stewards of the lands with different outcomes as well. But through sharing data, through discussing and adopting best practices, we were able to come up again with a work plan where we did our best work together. And some of that is exemplified in coming together to look at what was the true health of the mountain. And in understanding the true health of the mountain in both our 2016 and then a recent update to our peak health report, we saw that forest ecosystems was one of those key areas that we could really be working together. Not only because of the threat to forests, but also because of the true opportunity to move this needle in terms of their resilience. So the map on the left gives you a good sense of just how vast forest cover is here in Marin County. And then the map on the right shows you how much of those forested lands are stewarded by those 4 agencies. So you also get a real profound impact for just how much responsibility we have as a collaboration to take our forest stewardship seriously. In developing our strategy, we did a lot of things that a lot of you are probably doing. These are not homogeneous landscapes. Again, that biological diversity is really important for us to understand. So we mapped our diverse forest types across the landscape. We then looked at which agencies were responsible for which lands and which types of forest cover, and then modeled the health of those stands to understand where we could really have direct impact. That gave us the tools to really grapple with where should we be doing our work, how best can we be doing our work, and how do we make sure that we're having big wins rather than spreading ourselves thin, trying to undertake everything all the time, all at once. Having that strategy in place, and to really kind of return to the question you asked, here it is, clear as mud, right? We did this. But no, it was really having that strategy in place that allowed us to then sync up with our folks at the fire agencies, to be able to say, where do you most need us working? Where are you most concerned about? But how do we, as land managers, as scientists, as biologists, make sure that those why and how we're delivering the work is truly benefit and helping to reset those forest ecosystems on a healthier course? A great example of this, which I think we've talked about quite a bit in prepping for this panel, is Marin County Parks. So Marin County Parks has the greatest amount of oak woodlands across the county. It's not surprising, those tend to be on the eastern side of the county where we see warmer weather, drier lands, but that's also where we see the most population in the county and also a lot of our really popular kind of front country, more traditional parks. So in identifying that Marin County Parks had a great opportunity to really focus on oak woodlands and make sure that those were healthy ecosystems, as well as address those as clear areas that needed to be protected because they sat next to our closest and densest population centers, they were then more effectively able to leverage their resources and take on that forest type across both their open space and park parcels. And we could do all of that in syncing up with our fire agencies. So while there's a lot of soup in the recipe, I think it's really those 2 circles at the bottom that I want to really lift up to you guys, that in that Venn diagram and working together, our open space agencies are able to do what they do best, which is focus on health and restoration of our forests, and our fire agencies are then able to focus on risk reduction and fire prevention. But in doing that together, we're able to develop both more resilient communities and more resilient forests. And we look forward to keeping the party going, right? With our regional plan in place, we've been able to fundraise more than $15 million over the last 18 months. As we've spoken to, we've been able to leverage that really heavily, almost one-to-one with agency funds. And we've been able to do that in close collaboration with both our tribal partners and our fire agencies to make sure that these projects are truly multi-benefit. With the passage of Prop 4, we are, of course, very eager to increase our pace and scale and are really grateful to so many of our funders who are joining us here today. But moreover, I hope in seeing all these beautiful pictures of the mountain, you all are encouraged to come out and join us on some field trips. One TAM Partners will be hosting folks across the county tomorrow at 4 fantastic opportunities to see our work.
Thank you, Claire. That collaboration you are talking about is so critical for the whole community approach that I think we're all striving for. So with that, thank you to the panelists, and I will turn it over to the executive committee and chairs.
Thanks so much, JC, and congratulations and kudos. If I'm being honest, I had heard a lot about Marin County's leadership on this, but I had no idea what you were doing or how you were doing it. So I think you gave everyone in the room who's not from Marin a really clear example of how your local leaders and ultimately residents stepped up. I also take the chief's point that your specific model is so powerful and it may look different in different places. So to me, one of the key takeaways is for local communities, local jurisdictions, not simply to wait for the support from the state or the federal government, but to actually take matters into your own hands. And that's what you've really done. The second key takeaway is really institutionalizing the collaboration across different land management agencies. Critically important. I spent a lot of January in Los Angeles, as you'd imagine, and one of our lines of work is with the community of Malibu that has a lot of public open space around it. You have national parks, you have state parks, you have a state conservancy, you have a authority, you have a county park. And I look at what Mount Tam has been able to do. At the end of the day, fire obviously doesn't respect those jurisdictions. And frankly, most of us that use those lands don't even really distinguish between the jurisdictions. So to me, there's real power in what you've been able to accomplish in coordinating across those, not only the fire agencies, but the land management agencies. And I think we can learn a lot from that and hopefully apply that in different parts of the state. Yes, I want to turn it over to Patrick.
There we go. So Mark, you've obviously, as Wade said, had a tremendous amount of success in getting a variety of agencies to work together. But give us a candid perspective on the challenges you're facing, particularly on the permitting side, between your efforts, state parks and others. And then how do you think the governor's new executive order may help or not in working through some of those issues?
That's a bit of a loaded question. Well, and I that last the second to last slide that Claire showed is kind of a kumbaya slide, right? That everybody's getting along. The fire agencies love the land management agencies. The land management agencies love the fire department. Guess what? That has not always been the case. And there was several years ago, there was tremendous friction between the land management agencies and the fire agencies. And Jason and I will take ownership of that. We decided that we needed to have a 100-mile war of ridgetop fuel breaks. And we mapped it out, and we went to the media and said, this is what we want to do. But we never once called any of the land management agencies that 100-mile war was going to go over. You think that went over well? So, but sometimes that friction helps strengthen relationships if you can get through that friction. And I honestly believe that friction got us there. And so when it comes to CEQA and environmental compliance and NEPA, we thought we were going to need exemptions to get through the environmental process for CEQA and NEPA. And quite frankly, because of the people that we hired and the experts that we hired, environmental compliance has not been a hurdle for us. We have 4 project-specific analyses completed through the CalVTP in Marin. We have over 30 projects through notices of exemptions. We're working on initial studies, potential neg deck. But where we are being challenged and where I think the executive order is going to come in is, quite frankly, in the coastal zone. The Coastal Commission has a great charge, and they've done a lot of great work in protecting our coastal zone. But when it was created, I don't think it was envisioned for wildfire mitigation work. And we've been working for over almost 3 years now to get our public works plan. And I think we really appreciate what the idea behind the public works plan is. but we simply haven't been able to get that over the finish line. And if you look at our dashboards, you're going to see a lot of edge management work on the 101 corridor. You're not going to see a lot of work on the coastal zone. And so once the environmental, or the EPP, I know what that, once that comes out, we're really looking forward for that to come out. We want to be first up deck to get the authorizations to start doing work. And we're not going to do it in a way that violates our commitment to environmental stewardship. We just need to get through the regulatory process.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and that's a great teaser for the presentation after lunch. I also want to say, if you don't know what CalVTP is, it's the California Vegetation Treatment Program, and it's a streamlining tool that was developed over the last several years, as I understand it, like a programmatic environmental impact document that local projects can tier off. And to date, over 500,000 acres of projects have actually utilized CalVTP to move more quickly. So really appreciate your raising your use of that. Supervisor.
Thank you. And yeah, I just want to add my congratulations. I think you guys, this kind of measure, this funding that you're able to build this structure out of is a gold standard that would be so helpful to many counties across the state. Many counties won't be able to pass the measure. And so I think thinking about ways to incentivize residents and communities to take on some of the challenges without that funding measure will be important. One of my questions for you, given all that you've done, are your residents able to tell you stories, and Council Member McMillan, perhaps for you, of insurance decreases or any kind of insurance, if not decrease, at holding the line and not seeing the same level of increases that maybe other residents who aren't having the same kind of risk reduction work happen in their communities?
One of the things we tell residents is that to keep your insurance, you need to follow your defensible space report and create Zone 0 and good defensible space. There's been a number of insurance policy cancellations across Marin, but I think as we work together and make people more aware and get them to take the actual steps, they will have the standing to negotiate with their insurance carrier or another carrier to ensure that they can maintain their insurance. There are several fire-wise neighborhoods in Marin, more than 70, and it encompasses more than 50,000 people. Some insurance companies will offer discounts for insurance if you are a member of a fire-wise community.
Really helpful. Jen.
Hi. Thank you, everybody. This has been just so interesting. And again, being able to apply it outward to other communities and agencies is incredibly important. So Claire, I know you touched a little bit on this, and I'd love to hear from everyone on here. One of the challenges, the issues, what needs to be done, but prioritizing and deciding what actually needs to get done first, second, third, fourth, and get the agreement on it. I'm sure there was some cussing and discussing that went into some of that. And it's the friction, like you were saying, Mark, that can be really healthy on it. Can you guys describe a little bit more of how did you actually hone in on your Venn diagram, and how did you actually get to prioritizing those projects and that work?
Yeah, I mean, I almost want to pair it back to you, right? It's that keep showing up, right? It's that recognition that you are going to have hard days, you are going to have tough meetings, but if you keep showing up, you're going to keep working through that, and that it's certainly not a one and done, right? That was development of a strategy and a framework that we could come back to both when we had disagreement or needed to reprioritize or got a new grant and had more opportunity, right? So I think it's taking that time to celebrate, but I think a keep showing up commitment is important. And then I would say, I think, we've been lucky to be able to create capacity so that when you do show up, when you do have hard things, somebody has calendared the meeting, created the agenda, made sure that it's clear what the opportunities and challenges are, and having somebody that creates that capacity, that makes sure that you're effectively and efficiently using folks' time. We're all busy, we're all having to make hard choices, but if we can really be smart in our governance structure and smart in how we come together, then you encourage people to keep coming back and keep having those conversations.
And I would just add, a lot of people stood up for being part of a nonprofit in the room. And I do think this public-private, nonprofit, government partnership is great. And sometimes nonprofits can figure in, as the Conservancy has done, and provide a color of money or certain things that governments have a hard time doing. And then the value proposition, if you're a nonprofit, is, gosh, imagine if you were able to spend your resources and leverage all that government was bringing to the table. So more of these unique partnerships seems like a good idea. Supervisor McCauley.
Thank you, Wade. Yeah, really appreciate the discussion. Wanted to pull back to a comment that you made, Mark, in regards to your chipping days and the amount of materials that you guys are pulling out of those communities, which is phenomenal. But I'm curious to know, what are you doing with those materials? Are you able to monetize them? Are you having discussions about, what you can do to, I guess, reinvest in the community through that?
That's such a good question that, and I'm going to mess up the new name, but the Office of Planning Researcher, what's your new, I'm sorry. That one. They've provided Marin County a nearly $500,000 grant to evaluate the materials that we're producing, whether it's from on property, from our residents, or from the vegetation management work our agencies are doing, or the one-TAM agencies are doing, and how we could best utilize that. Currently, for the Chipper Day program, we're bringing all the facilities where they're mulching the material. In some limited, isolated cases, it's going to places where it's creating energy. But for the most part, it's being mulched. And that's part of the study that we're going through now. I'm looking at Bruce because he's part of it. We're almost to the finish line with the recommendations. And that'll be giving us guidance on how we can take more advantage of the material than just making mulch. It could be making power, or maybe on the larger dimensional stuff, it could start making furniture, it could start making art. And so trying to utilize all of that. So we're looking forward to publishing that report.
Yeah, and I'll just say something we've talked about in the last few years in this task force that we still need to make progress on is, how do we utilize, this vegetation, this woody biomass? And you mentioned you're part of a state investment, I think in 5 pilot projects to identify really what could we do. The fact is, we have so much vegetation that we're taking out of our landscapes to improve the health of landscapes and reduce fire risk. There aren't enough economic uses of that woody biomass. And if we find those economic uses, to your point, Supervisor, we can reinvest that revenue back into projects. So appreciate Marin helping lead the way on this.
Okay, well, thank you so much to all of our panelists, and congrats on all you've achieved here.